Hello, gunslingers. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the... Now that that's over, welcome everybody to another Eternal Deck Tech. And a big shout out to the wonderful people who have been donating me some extra money on my birthday here, so that we can try and get some things like a new non-squeaky chair. Big shout out to Carvius and Hand Warrior, especially this month, but of course to all the subs and patrons who help support me, and to inkgaming.com, who is one of my wonderful sponsors. And I have a store with them down below. You can check it out. They have lots of cool mouse pads and play mats and all kinds of cool gaming gear. We've got hoodies and shirts now up in Ink Gaming, and you can get 12% off by using my code Ilyon12. And let's jump right on in. What we have for you this week is an expedition list, because I've just been really enjoying Expedition. And this one is Albon Even. So we're going to be trying an even-handed Golem list. This was based on a few decks that I've had submitted by chat that were actually for non-expedition, so just regular ranked format. And just after Evenhanded Golem got the nerf where it had Voidbound, just finding various ways to make it still playable. And Elysian was pretty good because of things like Twinning Ritual and all the different copy effects, Mirror Image, Sudden Schism, stuff like that. You can't obviously use Mirror Image, because Even-handed Golem, it was using things more along the lines of like Howling Peak and stuff like that instead. And of course, Sudden Schism, like I mentioned. Lots of end of hostilities, so you'd have 6 and you could copy it twice. Unfortunately, that's not legal in Expeditions, but there are lots of good options. So a lot of the goals are to accelerate so that the missing out on like an odd numbered turn isn't as painful. So we've got some Devotee of the Sands to help with that. So basically on turn 2 you can play Devotee of Sands, and that means on turn 3 you can actually just jump to 4 drops, right? You can immediately get a Sandstorm Titan or a Lethrai Soothsayer or Albon Roa, or you can just slam 2 even-handed golems or like a Twinning Ritual even-handed golem. Just all those kinds of things. You can do a bunch of different combinations of stuff on turn 3 instead of having to just play another 2-drop. Same thing on turn 5, right? Play a Devotee of the Sands on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you can have some extra things going. So just stuff like that. So just ways to kind of jump past from 5 to 6 and stuff like that. So that's Devotee of the Sands, the reason for that. I wish that we could have Trailmaker, because more ways to bump up our maximum power would be great. Same with like an Initiate, but obviously Trailmaker is not available in Expedition, and Initiate costs 1, so not really reasonable, but Devotee of the Sands is a great little stopgap, and honestly, really nice. Being able to shift it so that it's not super vulnerable to removal is great, and it's just got a nice butt, so if you are facing down somebody who's super aggressive, you can stop all of those obnoxious things like Oni Ronin. Then we have Burdenbearer Wisp. We've only got 2 Burdenbearer Wisps, because I found that it wasn't proactive enough. You generally want to be playing it a lot later than turn 2, because you want the Onslaught and to be able to put back a Temple Scribe or an Even-handed Golem, or even later like an Albon Roa or an Lethrai Soothsayer, because those are great little come-into-play abilities. But that means that you're playing it on like turn 6 or turn 4 at the earliest, and that's not really where you want to have all of our 2-drops. It's a little too slow for the deck. We have 4 Even-handed Golem, because, hey, obviously it's the name of the deck. We've got Temple Scribe as well, just as a stopgap for when we don't have Even-handed Golem. We still have things to do with our Burden Bearers, and like Twinning Ritual, things like that. Just nice way to kind of slow the game down a bit. Still trades with Oni Ronin, still draws his cards, gains a little bit of life, all those kinds of things. You can throw it away to turn on Onslaught, which is something that we need a lot of. Burdenbearer Wisp and Lethrai Soothsayer and Albon Roa all need it. And so you really want to have some way to actually be attacking in. Temporal Scribe can do that, and you don't really care about throwing it away too much. We have Albon Roa, which has been way better than I expected. Albon Roa has been really impressive. I've played against it a couple times in Expedition, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to build this deck, because it's just obnoxious. The Onslaught most of the time basically reads as not double the cost of a card in the enemy hand, but just make them discard a card. Like, there's so many times where something's a 4-drop, you make it 8, and then you just don't get to play it for the rest of the game. It's just done. You ever hit another Albon Roa and it's for sure out? It's 16. Generally, though, you even just hit something else again, just make another thing cost 8. It's super disgusting. It does require that you be proactive and you are essentially ahead on board. It's much, much, much worse when you're stuck, especially defensively. It's really bad. When you're in a middling position and you're just kind of like tied with your opponent on board, you might have to throw something away to get it to go off, but that's why we have things like Temple Scribe, and that's also why we have some flyers. Burdenbearer, Wisp, and Lethrai Soothsayer really do help with Albon Roa quite a bit. But yeah, when you actually get it early and you're able to trigger the onslaught right away, it is despicable. And then you can start sudden schisming it. There is very few games that your opponent can recover from when you go turn 3, like after Devotee of Sands, you attack, play Albon Roa, and then immediately sudden schism the next turn so that it's got killer. Like, it's so stupid. You can do some really, really despicable things with it. So you can do some really sick things with Albon Roa. Lethrai Soothsayer, similar kind of idea. You just get to fill your deck with Premonition Bolts. Still works with Evenhanded Golem because the bolts cost 0. And filling your deck with bolts is pretty easy to do when you have Twinning Ritual and Sudden Schism and Burdenbearer Wisp to bounce it back. And it's a fairly powerful thing to do. The flying helps it to trigger all of our other onslaughts, so like more Soothsayers or other Albon Roa, things like Burdenbearer Wisp. So it's nice to have a little bit of flying. Lethrai Soothsayer does a lot of work for us there. We've got Sandstorm Titan, which seems awkward because we were just talking about how you need flyers to get through, but the thing is that Sandstorm Titan is so busted against any super aggressive decks that it's just worth it anyways. And stopping flyers sometimes can be really good. Like, there are other people that'll have better flyers than we do. And when that happens, then it's nice to have a Titan. So, Sandstorm Titan, still pretty fantastic. I mean, it's a bit of a non-bow with some of the flying that we want for Onslaught. But when you're facing down a bunch of Oni Ronins and, like, the really fast Rakano decks, Sandstorm Titan is so hard for them to remove and just so hard for them to actually fight through that it's totally worth the little bit of anti-synergy that it has with some of those. It's so cheap to play. Then we have Mystic Ascendant. We've only got 2 of them because I found, as I played with this deck, that we didn't tend to go super late and we didn't need to have the 6 drops. Like, we would rather just be doing Twinning Rituals into Soothsayers and stuff on 6 rather than playing Mystic Ascendant. But every once in a while, you play Mystic Ascendant, play a power card, and then your opponent just scoops because the card is a huge snowball. It's really hard to get out from underneath if they don't immediately have removal for it. So it's nice to have a couple of them anyways. And then we have our removal. We have a little bit of Ice Bolts. So Ice Bolt is one of those cards that's kind of awkward because it does give your opponent ramp. But that does mean that it's flexible. You can shoot your own things when your opponent tries to kill them if you're desperate for power. And it does actually help skip you from, say, like 2 to 4. So if your opponent goes to torch your Temple Scribe on turn 2, or like a Devotee of Sands or something, you can get around it a bit by Ice Bolting your own unit, and then you still get the jump to 4 if they do it on like a Devotee, or if they're doing it on Even-Handed Golem, and you just want to make sure that you hit 4. It's nice to do that. So Ice Bolt's good flexibility-wise that way, and it's also just one of the few removal spells that we get in Elysian, and especially on even cost. Like, there's very, very little. You basically have things like Permafrost, and that doesn't fly because it costs 1, and really not anything else. Like, Equivocate isn't available in Expedition. There's very, very little in terms of hard removal for an Elysian deck. So Ice Bolt is kind of just what we have to work with. And it's pretty solid. We have Royal Decree. I cut it down to 3 because I didn't feel like I needed multiples of them. But man, Royal Decree is disgusting. Another card that we need Onslaught for. But when you actually hit it, it's super, super despicable. You've played against Royal Decree a lot, and I'm sure you've seen how many times it just forces somebody to immediately scoop. And it goes so far, it goes really far in our idea of just kind of cutting our opponent off of answers. You know, you go ahead and turn 3, you Royal Decree them, and then turn 4, you Albon Roa, and they don't have much of a hand left at that point. So it's pretty gross when you can just pile those together and do a lot of proactive ripping of your opponent's hand apart. So we've got a lot of like tempo and ways to deal with our opponent's hand. And going on with that tempo side of things, we've got Teleport, which is flexible in terms of the way that we can bounce our opponent's things so we can get Onslaught through. Or we can just return our own Evenhanded Golem or Albon Roas and things like that, so that we can just continually use them again if we're just kind of at an even spot in the game. We've got Seek Answers as a way for us to get power cards, because we can't play Seek Power. But also then it's a little bit more flexible if we're late in the game and we've got enough power, then we can grab non-power cards. We have Twinning Ritual, we've talked about that a lot, just really good with Evenhanded Golems and Albon Roa, things like that. We have Sudden Schism to play copies of the Albon Roas and Soothsayers and Golems. All of our come into play abilities. It's just a good way to copy them. So a couple nice things to do there. And then, of course, just standard power. You're able to run 4 Insignia because we're not running any other color, and 4 banners, same kind of thing. And then just a bunch of Time Sigils and Primal Sigils. So pretty straightforward power base, pretty straightforward deck too, I would say. We don't have a market because all of the merchants and smugglers and stuff, they're all on 3. There's nothing that you can run. I mean, you can't run merchants in Expedition anyways, but smuggler is 3. There's not anything that we really want to do for market. It just totally destroys the idea of the deck, right? So here we go. We're gonna run these out and play through some games. Thank you so much for stopping by, and check out the next video where we actually do the games.